For our 60s oral history project, I interviewed my grandfather, Peter Robinson.
I had these summer jobs, going to college early on, and we were worried about the Cold War. We thought we had fear that Russia, the Soviet Union, was going to come over and bomb us. There was a constant fear at that time. Your grandmother's father had a bomb shelter built in the basement of the house.
The Cold War was a frightening time for many Americans. The threat of missiles or nuclear bombs felt constant, and it was so significant that my grandmother had a bomb shelter. Even though the Cold War never broke out into a bloody war, it was a scary period of time for many Americans.
And respect for authority and your parents and so on and so forth. They told you something to do, you did it. And then Kennedy was killed, assassinated, and that was a big impact on us. We all remember, like 9/11, we all remember exactly where we were when Kennedy was killed, assassinated. And that changed things a lot.
My grandfather grew up in a very strict household. He did what he was told and would always listen to his parents. He refers to the early 60s as an authoritarian time. He then goes on to reference Kennedy's assassination that happened November 22nd, 1963. This was a first in my grandfather's lifetime, where a major American leader had been killed. His death struck fear into the hearts of many, and it was an unforgettable day for all.
In dental school, as a hospital worker, I worked in labs and worked as a phlebotomist. And that was really impact on me. And that was back in the days when the doctor was a god. The physician was God, and they ran the hospital, and everybody was bowing down to him. So it was an authoritarian time. Dental school, and then we had.
As a hospital worker and dentist, he learned the power that doctors had. He believed that they were like a god, whereas the patients would listen and respected doctors significantly. He also refers to the authoritarian time again, meaning that in the workplace and as a doctor, they were very well respected.
Dental school, I was in the Navy, transferred to the Army, went to Walter Reed during the Vietnam War. The impact on me had a heavy impact on me because there were so many people that were anti-war at that time. And here I was, we get this wounded soldiers coming back, Army.
Yeah.
And we were in Washington, D.C., and they come back and they'd have face missing, or a jaw missing, or an arm, leg, or all limbs missing. And then you go and hear these people say, well, these terrible soldiers, they did all this horrible thing. And they were draftees, they had no choice.
Yeah.
They were drafted. Your age, you start thinking about it, you had to have a draft card.
My grandfather served in the Navy and then was transferred to the Army. The anti-war movement began during the Vietnam War, which he was a part of while he was in the Army. During this time, he saw countless injuries to the soldiers. He felt very sympathetic for them because they were draftees, and they were doing what they were told to do when they went out and fought for America. The draft was a rough period of time, and it got so extreme many would burn their draft cards or flee the country to avoid going to war.
Coming back to Vietnam and so on and so forth. So then I went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. It was a completely different atmosphere. The people, that was in the hallucinatory drugs they were using.
Yeah, that was like the hippies.
Yeah, well, and I never get walking across campus, and I wore a coat and tie. That was back in the days when students wore coats and ties.
Yeah.
So I walked across, I was from establishment, walked across campus, and these students would be out smoking little funny cigarettes and have half their clothes on, half their clothes off. And
The year before my grandfather attended Penn for the dentist school, my grandmother had my mom. During his time at Penn, this was the first time he was exposed to the use of hallucinogenic drugs and the hippies. He was shocked by what they wore and did because he had never seen people so disrespectful to authority and the fact that they were anti-establishment.
Anti-establishment, they make fun of a faculty member if he went ahead and gave a bad lecture. Before you never did that. You took, it's like, could you imagine your high school class teacher and hey, that's a horrible lecture.
At Penn, many students were part of the Students for a Democratic Society. Socialism was very present at Penn, as riots and protests happened frequently. The hippies at Penn used the Vietnam War as a symbol of what was wrong with establishment. They promoted peace and justice and wanted to end the war. My grandfather said while looking back at the 60s, it was the most action-packed decade of his life. People changed, and the American way of life changed. His personal view of life changed as well, as he had experienced brand new things that have stuck with him his whole entire life.